What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to the Scripture Scoop, aka some Bible reading. So, in the last chapter, we found out Isaac finally got a wife named Rebecca. And that was really the bulk of things. Abraham sent a servant of his to go to his physically distant family and find a wife, because he didn't want Isaac to marry a Canaanite woman. And long story short, it succeeded. Isaac got married. But now we're getting into chapter 25, and as it turns out, this is going to be the end of the Abraham saga, which has taken up quite a bit. It's probably more of our reading so far than not. But anyway, let me just get into this here. So, Genesis chapter 25, verse 1. Abraham married another wife, whose name was Keturah. She gave birth to Zimran, Hokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Yokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. Dedan's descendants were the Asherites, Letushites, and Leomites. Midian's sons were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abida, and Eldah. These were all descendants of Abraham through Keturah. Okay. You know, since it's such a brief little passage in the Bible, we tend not to think about the fact that Abraham had another wife. But he did. And, turns out he had way more immediate descendants from this wife than he had from Sarah. At least as far as we read. I mean, there wasn't any mention of Sarah giving him another child besides Isaac. Yeah, Abraham had more than one wife. Go figure. I mean, you know, only after his first wife died did he get a second wife. So it's not like he was, you know, unfaithful or anything like that. Well, depends on what you think of the whole Hagar situation. But anyway, let me not digress too much and continue on with the reading. Verse 5. Abraham gave everything he owned to his son Isaac. But before he died, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them off to a land in the east, away from Isaac. See, all the more reason I hesitated on the whole, like, being unfaithful thing. Because by the modern definition of, you know, faithfulness in marriage, Abraham was not that. But the culture of the time, that this was just kind of a thing, generally speaking, especially for one who was wealthy. But I guess, you know, it's not like he gave absolutely everything to Isaac. The bulk of it, sure, but, you know, he gave something to his other sons, it seems. Anyway, verse 7. Abraham lived for 175 years, and he died at a ripe old age, having lived a long and satisfying life. He breathed his last and joined his ancestors in death. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, near Mamre, in the field of Ephron, a son of Zohar the Hittite. This was the field Abraham had purchased from the Hittites, and where he had buried his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who settled near Beer Lahai Roi in the Negev. Okay, so again, this chapter is getting a bit, you know, more historical and genealogy like we had back in chapters, I think, 5 and 10. But in any case, So Abraham lived. Well, so Sarah was 100 when she died, if I remember right. So Abraham, turns out, lived quite a while after. Oh, no. Sarah was 127 when she died. Still, Abraham lived nearly another 50 years after the fact. So, quite a while. But anyway, I do remember Bir Lahai Roy being mentioned before. Might want to eventually go back to that and kind of connect the dots as far as, the significance of it and, why it was named that. But in any case, the main thing I'm pointing out right now is that, hey, guess what? These places that are mentioned and given particular names, they often reappear in the biblical story. Anyway, verse 12. This is the account of the family of Ishmael, the son of Abraham through Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian servant. Here is a list by their names and clans of Ishmael's descendants. The oldest son was Nebaioth, followed by Kedar, Abdil, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tima, Yetur, Naphish, and Kedema. These 12 sons of Ishmael became the founders of the 12 tribes named after him, listed according to the places they settled and camped. Ishmael lived for 137 years, then he breathed his last and joined his ancestors in death. Ishmael's descendants occupied the region from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt in the direction of Ashur. There they lived in open hostility toward all their relatives. And a little asterisk there. 25:8. It just says the meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. Okay. So I guess it's not really known for sure who exactly Ishmael's descendants lived in hostility with. Yeah, so as promised, Ishmael did have a number of descendants. I mean, his direct descendants were 12, right? Yeah, 12 sons. The Bible has a habit of not really mentioning daughters so much. And it could be, due to the just kind of more male-focused tradition, as well as, even today we kind of have the tradition of, whenever people get married, the woman adopts the man's last name. So, in that kind of, or at least in a similar kind of fashion, it was probably viewed that, the male was the one primarily who continued the bloodline. And that was a primary way of, having honor in those days was, being able to pass on your bloodline and have a legacy that you leave behind in that way. Anyway, verse 19. This is the account of the family of Isaac, the son of Abraham. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and the sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was unable to have children. The Lord answered Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins. But the two children struggled with each other in her womb. So she went to ask the Lord about it. "Why is this happening to me?" she asked. Okay, so kind of focusing on Isaac for a little bit here, the story is, and I don't think it was mentioned before how old Isaac was when he and Rebekah got married. Well, now we have that information. And, Rebekah was unable to have children for a while, but then Isaac, prayed, or as it says here, pleaded with the Lord, that she would be able to have children, and now she's got twins, but they're like figuratively duking it out with each other. Anyway, verse 23. And the Lord told her, "The sons in your womb will become two nations. From the very beginning, the two nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve your younger son." So that's not a very common thing, just in society those days, or really, it was, not a common viewpoint or thought in those days, just in general. It was kind of assumed that firstborn son is the one that gets all the honor and the power and all the good stuff, essentially, or at least all the better stuff. But that was not to be the case with these two sons of Isaac and Rebekah. So, verse 24. And when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she did indeed have twins. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat, so they named him Esau. Then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. Okay, so that means there was about 20 years of marriage that passed in between, them getting married and their sons being born. And I don't even really have to look down at the footnotes for these, probably talking about the meanings of the names. But I'll read it anyway. Esau sounds like a Hebrew term that means hair. Again, they were not necessarily they were kind of blunt almost with their children's names oftentimes back in those days. And then Jacob sounds like the Hebrew word for heel and deceiver. I mean, the heel part certainly, I think deceiver almost might be more of a derivative of it, or at least that would be my guess. Kind of like, if you're at all familiar with, heel as a wrestling term, I mean, that's generally kind of a bad guy. And I think it's meant, almost more as a, because it also translates from a word that means heel, it could be related to kind of, tripping someone up because you're grasping at their heel. And tripping up could be a way of saying, deceive, or that's kind of my thought process with this. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm thinking too hard on how those have the same meaning, or how those two different words are kind of derived from the same Hebrew. But so essentially Isaac and Rebekah wound up naming their children Harry and Trippy. Or, again, I mean, Esau translates to hair-ish, or at least it sounds like a word that means hair, and Jacob comes from heel, or deceiver, and that's where the whole kind of heel deceiver kind of connection there and how those are related is why I said trippy there, because it's like, grabbing at the heel, tripping up, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, all right, enough on that tangent. Verse 27. As the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter. He was an outdoorsman, but Jacob had a quiet temperament, preferring to stay at home. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating the wild game Esau brought home, but Rebekah loved Jacob. I mean, you're not really supposed to have favorite kids, but, I mean, when you have your preferences and a certain child leans more toward those than another, I suppose in a way it's only a bit natural. But also, does this not sound a bit like Cain and Abel? In terms of, like, Abel was kind of the hunter, whereas, Cain was more the gatherer. So the different demeanors like that. But anyway, moving on, verse 29. One day when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau arrived home from the wilderness, exhausted and hungry. Esau said to Jacob, "I'm starved. Give me some of that red stew." This is how Esau got his other name, Edom, which means red. Was his hair not also red? I'm pretty sure it said that, first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair so it didn't say necessarily that the hair was red, but that anyway. So I think there's more than just the stew connection there. That would have been a reason for him to be called red, essentially. Anyway, verse 31. "All right," Jacob replied, "but trade me your rights as the firstborn son." "Look, I'm dying of starvation," said Esau. "What good is my birthright to me now?" But Jacob said, "First you must swear that your birthright is mine." So Esau swore an oath, thereby selling all his rights as the firstborn to his brother Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate the meal, then got up and left. He showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. So, I'm not sure if that's meaning, like, from that point on, he then showed contempt, or, like, if through these actions of his, he showed contempt. I suppose to some effect both are true, but, I mean, his whole reason for kind of giving that right away was, because he was so hungry, he was like, I'm so hungry I'm gonna die. What do I care? I won't get my rights as the firstborn if I die. So, alright, sure, here you go. I give you my rights as firstborn so that I can have some of that stew and not die of starvation. At least maybe I'll be able to get something, because I'll still be alive. So this is already kind of, showing signs of what God told Rebekah earlier, that the older son will serve the younger. But anyway, there is more to that story where it continues on, but that's in the next chapter, so I guess I'm going to end it there for now. So anyway, yeah. Not really sure if I have much else to say regarding all this. It was kind of I don't know. there were, like 4 different subheadings as I read through that, really. So it was not a super duper focused chapter, but hey, you know what? It covered a lot of stuff, and at least it was kind of interesting to keep track of all that and what was happened and how we have now moved the story on past Abraham, finally. Only took like 15 chapters. Anyway, okay, so yeah, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video and want others to see it. Subscribe and click the bell to get updates when I post new stuff. Or if you're, seeing this through Facebook or Twitter or whatever, I mean, I think those take you to YouTube anyway, but on the off chance that I'm wrong about that, I mean, you're probably following my accounts on there already. So wherever else you happen to see this from, just follow me, keep track of what I'm doing. But YouTube, subscribe to my channel and click the bell to get updates. And apparently, from some things that I've heard, you might need to actually consistently watch my videos in order for those updates to keep coming. Maybe that's wrong, I don't know. But anyway, that's just me trying to be extra sure that if you're wanting to keep up with what I'm doing here, that you're able to. So anyway, if you need any more info on anything, just look down in the description, for info regarding interacting, finding social media pages, and all that good stuff. Other than that, just leave your comments down below with any thoughts that you have regarding this, other Bible stuff, other video ideas, whatever you have for me. So that's it. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I will see you for the next chapter or the next video, whatever the case is. Until next time, stay cool, people.